obscure in the future, and more people can encounter it. Finally, let's turn to the How I Got Into Board Games segment. Last time on this segment, I described my history with CCGs. It was probably natural that my next infatuation would be with collectible miniature games. I dipped my toe in first with the short-lived Lord of the Rings Combat Hex Tradable Miniatures game, and dabbled for a little bit with the early DC HeroClix sets. But what really captured my time and attention was, perhaps unsurprisingly, the Star Wars Miniatures game from Wizards of the Coast. I remember I got the powerful Obi-Wan in my first pack. I was burned out of running tournaments by this time, so I let my friends take the lead in organizing the ones for this game. I played the game competitively for 5 years, and my friend Matt Hansen became one of the top-ranked players in the world. I think the highest I ever got was 60-something in the rankings. There were several cool things that separated this game from other collectible miniatures games, like commander effects, force powers, and a diverse slate of special abilities. Part of the appeal for me was finding interesting ways to combine the figures and the very limited number of points a player could spend on an army build. Obviously, the theme was attractive as well, but what I particularly appreciated about that was the inclusion of the expanded universe into the sets. The Knights of the Old Republic set was a highlight for me because it drew on content from the video games and comics of the same name, which are both a favorite of mine. Perhaps uncoincidentally, it was the very next set, the Clone Wars, that became the first set I didn't collect in its entirety, and I started to phase out of the game. They changed the set size with that set, and it just wasn't nearly as interesting to me as the previous sets had been. But there were other reasons why I started to get out of the game, very significant ones that would foreshadow my embracing of designer board games in the stead of collectible competitive games. I remember very distinctly one particular event. It was the Open World Championships at Gen Con, and I just spent 8 hours on a Saturday at Gen Con from 10 to 6, the entire time the event hall was open, going an unremarkable 3-3. Most of the field dropped from the tournament after losing a couple of games, knowing that they didn't have a chance at the finals unless they only had a single loss. But there was a massive discussion on the Wizards of the Coast bulletin boards in the weeks leading up to the World Championship, and the consensus from the self-righteous know-it-alls who dominated the boards was that anyone who dropped early was being dishonorable and wrecking the rating of those who stayed in the tournament because tiebreakers were determined by the record of opponents. So I stuck in it until the very end, because I didn't want to be dishonorable or wreck anyone's chance at the finals. But when it was all over, I felt nothing but jealousy for those who had left early. I felt I'd wasted the most important day of the biggest convention in the country for no good reason. The competition of the game just wasn't fun anymore. There were too many people who took the game too seriously, and it wasn't fun playing against them. The game had changed drastically over the years as well. There was a huge FAQ and errata, banned maps, and the type builds of the early years had been replaced by larger build formats. All of these things supposedly designed to increase the diversity and competitive fairness of the game, but resulting instead in stale meta builds that dominated the tournament scene. 7 of the 8 finalists that year had nearly identical squad builds, and only my buddy Matt Hansen brought something different and surprising to the finals that no one expected. When an initiative roll at the beginning of the game to determine who is first player, and which side of the map they start on, becomes the most important part of the game, I knew it was time to go. And the promised land of designer board games would become where I went to, as we'll see next time. Well, that's going to do it for episode 3. Thanks for joining me. Feel free to join the Out of the Dust podcast guild at BoardGameGeek.com. Follow the podcast on Twitter at OutOfTheDustBGG. Leave a comment at the guild. PM me on BGG under user handle Radagast14, or email me at radagast14@CenturyLink.net. Join the Out of the Dust conversation yourself at our monthly geek list at BGG. All right, play me out, Ananda.